Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. It's time for the C3 stream. All right, good evening. Hello, welcome. It's time for Tuesday night teaching. Thanks for hanging out with me. It is 7:30 p.m. And on Tuesday nights, we like to do Tuesday night teaching, which is a chance for us to do a little bit of Bible study together. Tonight, of course, however, is a unique Tuesday night. What makes it a unique Tuesday night, you ask? Well, that's because the Bucks play in 29 minutes. So, everybody, this is going to be an abbreviated half episode because only a couple of you diehards are going to be on anyways. And once it hits 8 o'clock, you're bumping off to watch the game. So we're going to do an abbreviated episode this week with just a Fear the Deer episode, where we're just going to do till like 5 minutes beforehand, and then we will cut it, okay? Does that sound good? You guys okay with that? I hope you're okay with that. Because we can't miss Game 6. Oh. I was looking at things, and it was saying that they haven't won in so many, it's like 50 years they haven't won, so can't miss Game 6. So here's the plan. We'll go to like 5 minutes to, and then we'll wrap her up and get you off to the Bucks game on time. That sound fair? Okay. Okie dokie dokie do. I got my cup of tea. Cup y'all. Yeah, there you are. Hey guys, you're there. Good evening. Let's do it. Let's jump into some Bible study. We're going to do about 20-30 minutes of Bible study, picking up and really just kind of finishing up where we left off last week with chapter 8. Frankly, I feel like we've been in chapter 8 forever. We've been taking our sweet time with chapter 8. But that's A-okay. There you go. And there you go. Oh, is this not working? I changed one silly thing, and now I don't know why it doesn't work. It's very confusing to me, but we were able to see all your comments. Trudy, good. All right, works for you. You haven't practiced violin yet. Great. So we'll get you off in time to practice a little violin. Here we go. This is chapter 8, and just a recap. We finished last week with the Gerasene demoniac. A famous. This is one of the most famous, if not the most famous, of the casting out of demons. It's this incredible story of transformation and change in this guy's life, and we get a strong sense of Jesus' identity. Is kind of where this left off. As Jesus confronts the demons know who he is, and he clearly has authority over them. In the same way that he has authority over the storms, we talked about that in weeks past, is in the same way that he has authority over the storms, he has authority over demons. And so, when the disciples are asking, who is this man? Part of the irony, of course, is that the demons know exactly who he is. He is Jesus, Son of the Most High God, right? And then it wraps up with this great play on words. Yeah, here we go. No, Jesus says, no, go back to your family, tell them everything God has done for you. And so he went throughout all of the town proclaiming the great things Jesus had done for him. So Luke is trying to make, as an author, trying to make a very clever statement here about the identity, answering the question that the disciples have asked of who is this man. This is not just merely a man in all normal practice. This is something altogether different. This is Jesus. This is incarnation. This is God in the flesh. This is God come among us. So he does that play on word by using the same verbiage, but what God has done for you, what Jesus has done for him. Okay? So that's where we left off. Kind of these questions about identity, these questions about Jesus, and these questions about, as God in the flesh, what does that mean and what does that imply in relation to his power and authority? Clearly he has power over nature, clearly he has powers over the forces of darkness, and then as we are entering into chapter 8, verse 40 through 56, we're going to see that he has power over sickness and death, disease and death, the last kind of two to round it out. So here we go. Verse 40. On the other side of the lake, the crowds welcomed Jesus. Just a reminder, he got kicked out. Not kicked out, but they wanted him to leave. They didn't understand who he was. They didn't, right? So, and the local people were like, get out of here. They were unhappy about Jesus. They begged Jesus to go away and leave them alone. Great statement as well from Luke about how quickly, when we don't understand, when we come to face with Jesus, not everybody understands. Not everybody can accept. Not everybody can take a hold of what he's doing in people's lives. And so, they're afraid of him, and as a result, ask him to leave. So he leaves that Gentile, unclean area with the pigs and all that jazz, hops in the boat, and then he heads back to the other side of the lake. Now, on this side of the lake, the crowds, which is ironic because this is kind of who Jesus was trying to avoid previously, right? Jesus is being hounded by crowds at this point in time in his ministry. And so, he's back in Jewish territory. He's back among people. The Sea of Galilee's not very big. So, he goes from one side and then he just basically pops back over to the other side, probably in his stomping grounds. I don't think we get an actual location on this. No. We don't get an actual location on this, but it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like Capernaum or something like that on the Sea of Galilee, Capernaum was Jesus' home base. And so he's traveling all around. He's got a lot of people around him. Okay. And funny enough, they've been waiting for him, right? So, the chances that this was his home base are high because by this time they have figured out where he lives. They've figured out where his home base is. And so poor Jesus just can't escape the crowds. Talk about pressure. Wherever this guy goes, people want something from him. He's been doing all these miracles and healings and stuff. And so ironically, going in the boat is one of the few places where he has some quiet time with his disciples. But by the time he gets to kind of home base, there's a bunch of people waiting for him. And what's implied here, of course, is that, the people that have been waiting for him are probably, I think we've seen this as well. Yeah, we did, but it's in one of the earlier chapters. By this time in the story, the crowds are comprised of both people who want to hear what he has to say, but also there's a place earlier where it talked about how people are bringing the sick, the hurting, the broken. People are bringing to Jesus. He's known as a miracle worker, and so they're bringing people who need miracles to him, right? So if you have somebody sick, you hear about this Jesus fellow, you pack mom up and you bring her down to see Jesus as best as you can. And so he's probably crowded by all of these people who want something of him, namely that he would heal the whoever or whatever's going on in their lives, right? So the reason that's important is because it sets up what's implied coming. The reason that this guy Jairus is here is because he's probably part of the crowd waiting for him. Then a man named Jairus, a leader of the local synagogue. Now, this is interesting. So we don't know much about Jairus, but we do know this. He's a leader of the local synagogue. Now, it doesn't say he's a Pharisee per se. Just a reminder, a synagogue would have been essentially a Jewish community center. That's really what it is. It's a Jewish community center. And because Jews do not have separation of church and state in any way, shape, and form, they have instead what is called a theocracy. That is to say that their state and the affairs of state are intertwined with and cannot be separated from their Jewish practice, their faith practice. So to be a Jew is not to have like compartmentalizing the affairs of state from faith. Therefore, the local synagogue is a community center / town hall / religious place. It's as if the church was also where all the decisions in the town was made. Bear with me. So it doesn't necessitate that he's a Pharisee or a student of the law or something like that, but he's definitely he's a bigwig. He's an influential person in the local community center synagogue. The place where everybody goes to conduct business and faith and debate and learning and all this sort of things. He would have been well known. What's implied here is assumed. What's assumed here is that because he is a leader of the local synagogue, he's probably, I don't want to say upper crust, but or affluent per se, but there's a good chance that he had some means to him, perhaps was a businessman or something like that. It certainly was, you only become a leader of the local synagogue if you are a person of faith, right? So certainly had a robust faith and Jewish practice of that faith. There's no other way for him to become into such an influential position, right? Well, so this Jairus guy, who's got a lot of sway in the local synagogue, comes and falls at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come home. Okay, note this. We're seeing this recurring theme of people falling at Jesus's feet. We found that with the where is it? Sitting at Jesus's feet. There it is. So we saw this in the demoniac being when he was freed from the demons, the Gerasene demoniac comes and he sits at the feet of Jesus. The woman who, going all the way back, the woman who anoints Jesus's feet, right? So there seems to be this, what's implied here is, the place to be is at Jesus's feet, essentially speaking. Where you want to be is at the feet of Jesus. We say that as Christians all the time, like, come and sit at the feet of Jesus type thing. And there's good reason. It's because it's here in the Bible. So all of these people come and fall at Jesus' feet. So Jairus comes and he falls at Jesus' feet. That's the right place, a place of acquiescence, submission, veneration, a place of worship, etc., a place of learning, all those sort of things. This is what Jairus, this leader, does. He allows Jesus to lead him, essentially speaking. He falls at Jesus' feet, recognizing his need for him, and pleads. Begs, pleads. Let's see what the Jewish word here. Jewish word. Greek word. Yeah. Okay. Urge, implore, exhort, ask or request earnestly. Used in a couple different other places. To entreat, to exhort, to comfort. Interesting. To call in. Oh yeah. So it's definitely a common word. It's used all over the place. At least the root is all over the place in the New Testament. So he I've seen this somewhere elsewhere, but like translated as begged. So I was just curious if beg is, and it's kind of like, kind of. To plead with him to come home with him. Jairus' only daughter, and sometimes it also gets translated as only child, comma, a daughter. Okay, so if we go to the Greek itself, it probably is child, and then it probably is the word for child with a female ending, is what I'm assuming here. Let's look it up. Oh no, it is a noun, daughter. Yeah, no, it's the noun for daughter. Okay, so it is. It's why in the world would it say that? Okay, so maybe there might be some variation in some other texts that add the his only child, comma, a daughter. They could. This would be adding simply. This is what's implied. This in the Greek. This is what's implied. Is child is implied, right? You are a child if you are a daughter. It's kind of redundant. So it's redundant, that's all. His only daughter, who was about 12 years old. So she's young. She's little. She's a little youngin'. And she's dying. Now, just a reminder for you, we've seen in cases where Jesus has come significantly and intervened in the life of someone whose child was dying / dead. If you guys remember a couple chapters ago, there's a woman who's coming out and she's wailing at the head of a funeral line, right? And it's because her son, the young man, has died and she's a widow and all those sort of things. So here we get a parallel in some ways in that it's flipped a touch. We have a daughter who is dying as opposed to a young man who is dying, and instead of having a mom, we've got a dad. Okay, so gosh, I've got 3 little girls. Yep, that's what you do. If your daughter is dying, you fall at the feet of Jesus and you beg him to help. That makes sense to me. As Jesus went with him, he was surrounded by the crowds. Okay, now here's something fascinating. This is something which is often referred to as a... There it is. Up through 50. No. That's too far. There it is. This is one of the most complicated little nuances in... There it is. So it's the end of 42 up in through 48. And what this is sometimes referred to as a Markan sandwich. Yep, sandwich. The idea behind a Markan sandwich is quite simple. It comes from the Gospel of Mark. So this whole text, this whole chunk, is clearly drawn upon Mark. And just a reminder for you, Mark was written by a guy named John Mark. And John Mark probably interviewed Peter. That's where you get the Gospel of Mark. At least we think that theoretically... am I live right now? Yes, I am live. The question is, am I live? Yes, I am live, but I am stopping in 10 minutes because it's already 7:47. We're stopping in 10 minutes in case you missed the opening because the Bucks game is happening soon. So I realize y'all want to watch the Bucks, but this is live. All right. Trudy's got violin and I've got the Bucks and you've got other things to do too. So, okay, we're rocking and rolling as fast as we can. This is a Markan sandwich show, and the idea between a Markan sandwich is this happens in Mark uniquely, and then Luke, kind of extracts this and then adds this into his own account. And that's where you have the beginning of a story and the end of a story, and he slips into the middle another story that ties things together. And, there is so much, believe it or not, study done on this. Everything from language and grammar and syntax to, why did he do this? Why didn't he just tell this as separate stories and all these sort of questions? We don't have time to go into it today. But it is fascinating. Basically, what you have is you have the beginning of the story about Jairus and his daughter, and then all of a sudden there's a slight transition. As Jesus starts to begin to go and respond to Jairus, we are reminded that the crowds are here. So we get a sense that this was being set up as we have the same inference up above. We get the crowds, and now here we get the crowds again. So, this is planted. These words are planted purposefully to set us up for the Markan sandwich. And in the Markan sandwich, this is a particularly interesting in that this Markan sandwich has to do with a young woman or a daughter who is sick, and yet we find a woman in the crowd who is also sick. And very clearly she's, a mature-aged adult. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. Oh, yeah. And sometimes you get this additive. You find this common in a lot of Bibles. Having spent everything she had on doctors. There's multiple manuscripts, and there are sometimes these editing nuances, and that's why it's always important to pay attention to the asterisks that you do have. So here's a case where, either this was added later or it was part of the original and it was clipped or something like that. But the idea being that, this is a woman of desperation. She has been suffering for 12 years. Oh, by the way, how old is the daughter? 12 years old. So these stories relate to one another and are very purposefully intertwined. Very purposefully intertwined. She has suffered for 12 years as long as this little girl has been alive. And she is suffering with I just can't imagine what this must be like, ladies. Can you imagine bleeding for 12 years? The thought here is, of course, is menstrual cycles. And this has particular implications within the context of the Jewish people, because a Jewish woman who is bleeding at the time of bleeding is considered to be unclean. That is to say that they have to do extraordinary amounts of ritual washing. There are certain things they can and can't do. Blood is of the utmost importance in the Jewish faith. Blood is largely considered to be the bearer or carrier of life. That's why they have certain practices, like, for example, around kosher and diet, related to how animals are killed and how blood is harvested and things like that. It's very intricate. It has to do with their theology, and it has to do with their understanding that life is carried in blood. And so the idea that her life is literally seeping out of her for 12 years is so significant. Like, she can't do what most people can do. She is unclean, rejected, not supposed to be around people. She is not allowed to be close. It's all that sort of stuff. She's got a lot of social implications, spiritual implications. Not only does she have physical realities that she's dealing with, but social, spiritual, and the rest that she's suffering from, right? So this is actually a really big deal. And of course, she could find no cure. So in the same way that Jairus is desperate, this woman is desperate. She got nowhere else to go. Coming up behind Jesus, she touched the fringe of his robe. Immediately, the bleeding stopped. Whoa. Trippy. Who touched me? Jesus asked. Everyone denied it. In Mark, there's got other language to this and sort of stuff. You could read this in the Mark story, but everyone's like, wasn't me. They're all like nervous, like, is he mad? He must be mad. He must be mad. Definitely wasn't me. Definitely wasn't me. Peter, being Peter, is just kind of like, Master, the whole crowd is pressing up against you. It's kind of like, do you not see all the people touching you, Jesus? Like, what are you talking about? Peter, in this case, in Mark, Peter's kind of a numbskull, which is great because Peter's probably the one that gave us the Gospel of Mark, so to speak. It was one of his accounts. So in Luke, it classes up just a bit, and he acknowledges him as master, and he's kind of like, Jesus, there's a lot of people everywhere. What do you mean? Who touched me? Like, what kind of question is that? But he's emphatic. Jesus is emphatic to the point where he actually turns around and engages further, saying, someone deliberately touched me, for I felt healing power go out from me. So here we get this sense of healing power, right? And again, this is going to forecast into the story that we have in front of us, the Markan sandwich, the conclusion. But it also has this sense of power, right? That in the same way, Jesus has power over the wind of the waves, and he has power over the demons. He has power over the diseases and pains that come with our physically ailing bodies. And this is not only good to forecast for this little girl, but it also, healing power will lead us into resurrection power. Okay? So when the woman realized that she cannot stay hidden, like busted, she began to tremble and fell on her knees in front of him. The whole crowd heard her explain why she had touched him and that she had been immediately healed. So it's interesting because she both says, like, yeah, it was me. Guess where she is, by the way, again? On her knees in front of him, right? Falling at his feet. Again, these are all positives. And she, in her vulnerability, acknowledges both her suffering and the fact that she's been healed. So it's a testimonial, if you will. This is part of the power of the testimonial, is that in front of everybody, she gives a testimony. I was this, I'm now that. Testimony. Jesus responds, daughter. Ooh, what's that? We've seen that word before. You're correct. This is going to be the same word choice, very intentionally done, entwining these two stories. Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. This is all a beautifully interwoven story that is eliciting in us anticipation for the conclusion of the other story. Okay? Notice it is faith that made her well. Oh, I have like 2 minutes left, guys. We have like 2 minutes, then we got to go watch the Bucks. Okay. While he was still speaking to her, a messenger arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue. Okay, so a slave messenger shows up. Guess what? Your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now. Okay, so a guy shows up, and now we get a transition from a woman who is sick to a woman or daughter who is dead. Right? Dead. Note also the change. Jesus refers to the woman as daughter. That is to say that through her faith, she has now been included in the family of God in a unique way, in a personal, intimate way with Jesus, right? And so you get this family dynamic where Jairus has a daughter, earthly daughter, and in here you have Jesus claiming a daughter as well. He's claiming this woman as a daughter. And now you get this whole your daughter is dead thing, don't bother the teacher. Well, fortunately, that doesn't stop Jesus. When Jesus hears about this, he's like, don't be afraid, just have faith, and she will be healed. So in the same way that we pick up on faith being connected to a sense of healing and restoration, this is the same echoing that we get up here. Jesus is trying to bring that into Jairus' life. Okay. Now, we don't know much about how Jairus responded or whatnot, but we do know that, well, Jesus was determined and showed up. Jesus shows up, and he doesn't let anyone in except Peter, John, and James. Peter, John, and James are unique in that later on, these are the three guys that Jesus takes with him into the garden, to the second layer of the garden. They're also the three people that he takes to the Mount of Transfiguration. They get special glimpses into who Jesus is and kind of what's going on. Okay. So these are the three guys, for whatever reason, that Jesus continually kind of takes to that second layer. He also brings the little girl's father and mother. The house is filled with people weeping and wailing, unsurprisingly. So friends, family members, everybody is weeping and wailing because the little girl is dead. Stop the weeping. She isn't dead. She's only asleep. Now, it's not that Jesus is being silly or stupid here like she is. She's dead. But what he's speaking to is the reality that death doesn't have the final say. In the same way that the Apostle Paul picks up on death as merely asleep, this is what Jesus refers to death as. Death is akin to being asleep. He's speaking not to her present circumstance, but to the reality of her future. Right? That's what he's doing. He's not speaking to the reality that she is incapable. She's totally dependent on, her life is dependent on Jesus to bring to her. Right? That's what death is. And death is when you cannot do anything more of yourself. You literally cannot do anything more yourself. Like, you can't even make your heart beat. But Jesus turns this around and says, look, you got to think about this and frame this as sleep, because there is more yet to come for this young woman. And so in the same way, it doesn't surprise us that the Apostle Paul picks up on Jesus' understanding here and framework. And so the Apostle Paul will talk about death simply as sleep as well later on. We got like 1 minute. Okay. The crowd laughs at him because they all know that she died, right? And so they're stuck in their old framework of death being the final thing. Jesus, of course, has something else in store. Jesus takes her by the hand and says, little child, little girl, my child, get up. Let's look up the actual, is it pious? Okay, so it is. It's my child, get up. It's a command. It's not a request. And in the same way that he has authority over the wind and the waves, over the demons, he has authority over disease, and he has authority over life and death. And so in this case, he gives her a command and commands her to get up, commands her to have life, commands her to live, and of course, at that moment, her life returned to her, and she immediately stood up. Right? This is to show the level of which Jesus exercises God's authority as God. Jesus told him to give her something to eat. Her parents were overwhelmed. Jesus insists them not to tell anyone what had happened, similar to what you find in, the end of, obviously her family knows, right? But it's the messianic secret thing. That's what we're picking up on here, is the messianic secret. Okay, it's like 1 minute to 8 o'clock, 1 minute till tip off. I know you all have to go. Trudy has to do violin. So thanks for hanging out, guys, for the speed round. Thanks for doing the speed round with me. Woo! We did it. Like 30 minutes crash course. We did a couple verses and slipped in the Markin sandwich. Can't wait to see you guys on Sunday. We are hammering another psalm. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of the night. Go lift lives, elevate Christ. Go be a church for those who aren't here yet. And of course, next week, you bet, we'll be back kicking it off with chapter 9. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight, everybody. God bless you. And is it wrong for me to say go Bucks? I don't think so. Go Bucks!